random chunk from the archives.
John Cleese joined us a moment ago.
Morning.
Hello, John.
Hi.
You've seen
Nice to
Warhorse
see
on
you.
stage, haven't you?
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary.
Yeah. Do you like the idea of it being on film as well, or do you worry how it'll be?
I thought that the stage thing was, the stage performance was so dominated by the breathtaking skill of the operating of the horse
That's right.
that it'll become very different on film with real horses. So I'm fascinated to see it. But it's such an interesting story. you know.
Yes.
Quirky. That's what I loved about it.
Well, already tipping it for an Oscar. Well, no, anyway, next month when it comes out. Talking to John in just a sec about his career. He's got a DVD out first, though. Here's a last quick look at what's happening where you are.
Welcome back. Earlier this year, John Cleese, the man behind Fawlty Towers, Monty Python, Fish Called Wanda. We don't even have to say those things, do we?
Legend, a legend.
The legend, that is John Cleese, has joined us on the sofa.
Yes, embarking on his first ever live tour in the UK. Reason for hitting the road, according to John, he'll tell us in a minute, was he needed more money. Is that right?
Yes,
That's it.
The Alimony Tour is called. On the tour, John goes through the highlights of his career, from his big break on the Frost Report to the award-winning Fish Called Wanda. John's with us now to talk about it. Before we speak to him, let's have a look at a clip where John explains the moment he met the real Basil Fawlty.
Mr. Sinclair was the most gloriously rude man I've ever met. He would sit at reception staring into space, and then he would sense a guest coming and immediately become very, very busy. And the guest would have to walk up to the reception desk and stand there, and he would just continue as though the guest was invisible, and eventually the guest would say, excuse me, he'd say, oh, what? One morning, I left my briefcase by the front door because the taxi came to take me for filming, and I just forgot about it. And when I got back that evening, of course, I wanted to get it back, so I walked in. He was staring into space, saw me coming. Immediately, he was busy. I said, excuse me. He said, oh, what is it now? I said, what? I left my briefcase. He said, yes, yes, yes. It's over there behind the white wall. And he pointed out at the front door, and there was a swimming pool, and then about 70 yards away, there was a white wall. I said, why do you... He said, what do you want now? I'm trying to run a hotel here. I said, well, why did you put it behind the white wall? He said, we thought there might be a bomb in it. And I said, a bomb? And he said, and I promise you, he really did say this, he said, we've had some staff problems recently.
Perfect comedy material. Welcome to the programme, John.
Thank you.
Was Mr. Sinclair ever aware that he was the basis for Basil Fawlty?
Well, not for 10 years, but then after I'd seen the show transmitted for 10 years, I let slip to a journalist that it was based on this real hotel. Within a week, the paper had tracked him down to his retirement home in Miami. And,
Oh, he's not doing too badly then.
No, he was
so the
doing
hotel
all
did
right.
quite well if he
And
was in a
wouldn't
retirement
watch
home.
it. He wouldn't talk to them, wouldn't watch it. But they showed it to his daughter, who'd never seen the show, and she watched 2 episodes, and then she turned to the journalist and just said, "That's Dad."
Now, let's talk a little bit about your live show, because the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
Can I just talk about that first of all?
Yes.
You begin on. Well, I'm not sure. Is it tongue-in-cheek, or are you genuinely bitter? There is a kind of a. There's a thing, isn't
This
there?
is about the divorce.
This is about
and
the
the
I
divorce.
pretend I'm doing a sort of
what's going on? Are you-
mournful thing, with violins in the background.
I was left wondering, are you a bit bitter?
But this
about
was
it?
actually written for me, that first 4 or 5 minutes, which is all there is about the divorce. After that,
Yeah,
it's
then you
all-
stop and you
then
move
we
on.
stop, move on.
Yeah.
That was written for me by some young American and Canadian writers when I hosted the Just for Laughs thing in Montreal. And it's a superbly funny bit of material, because all they did was they got the statistics. And when I tell the audience that Alice Faye received $3,650 for every single day she was married to me, the audience kind of goes, ah, but they laugh as well.
How long were you married for?
14 years, I think. Long time, anyway. But that bit of material is so funny that I've kept it. But the truth is, I'm just about to do it in Australia, and I've done that joke enough, so I'm going to dump it now.
Oh, right, OK.
Yeah.
So that's going to go.
Well, it was a good joke at the beginning, but, if you tell a joke 2 or 3 times, it ages.
Yeah. How does the ex-wife feel about all that stuff?
I have no idea. No, she always said if we broke up, we would never speak again, and it's turned out
I think this
to
guarantees that you will never speak again.
Well, yes, it's turned out to be a very good arrangement.
Okay. Most of the DVD, most of the tour is about your career.
Yeah.
And how you started and going all the way through to Fish Called Wanda, but also doing all the Python stuff. And
Yeah.
tell us how it started right at the beginning. When did you think comedy? That's the thing I want to spend.
It was
my
a
life doing.
pure fluke, and that's what I talk about in the show, and it surprises people. And young comics have been fascinated to discover. The first time I was in the West End, which was with the Cambridge Footlights review of that year, I wasn't the star. Tim Brooke-Taylor and Bill Oddie, they were the stars. They were picked out, and I was mentioned as sort of number 3 or 4 in the batting order with David Hatch. Now, that surprises people. But I was never picked out until dear old David Frost, who's a friend to this day, asked me when I was in America, would you like to come back and be in a show I'm doing for the BBC with 2 people you never heard of called Ronnie Barker and Ronnie Corbett? And if he'd not asked me to do that, I've no idea how many years it would have taken me to get onto television.
Oh, the famous Class sketch.
Yes?
Okay,
Yes.
I think we have that.
Oh, you've
Let's
got
have
that.
a-
Everyone loves this one.
I look down on him because I am upper class. I look up to him because he is upper class. But I look down on him because he is lower class. I am middle class. I know my place.
So it was when you look at it now, so simple. I mean, just that one
Unbelievably
shot
so.
and the
Written
three-
by a guy called John Law, and it became iconic. Have you come across this word, iconic, that
Yeah.
pops
Yeah,
up in
yeah.
the papers now and again? And my great luck was to be working with those 2 very, very dear men, including dear Ronnie. And they were so kind and so good to work with. And what a start in life to be working with people like that.
Can I ask you, John, about the shock factor? Because these days, there's a lot about comedy and how shocking you can be, and people getting banned
Yeah,
from television,
yeah.
all that kind of thing. And one of the elements you look into in a live act is you talk about how people kind of forget that Monty Python particularly really offended a lot of people early on.
Yeah, the Independent about 2 years ago got hold of some minutes of a meeting, and I think out of the 9 heads of department, 7 of them thought that Python was horrible, disgraceful, beyond the bounds. It was 7 out of 9 people.
It's
who
a bit
did
hard.
This
Sorry.
is one of your favourite clips.
Oh, I
hard to
love that one.
concentrate.
That's harmless, that one. Yeah, that's harmless. But the
you
whole
did-
business of offence is very, very strange because, and I go into it at great length, but you know, the best advice I ever got on this, David Attenborough, head of BBC Two,
Yes.
cocktail party, and he says to me, one piece of advice, use shock sparingly. It's the best advice I ever got.
Because you do think that, I mean, I'm curious now, modern comedy and, you know, the way people push boundaries, I mean, do you approve of it? Do you think it's gone too far? I mean, where
Well,
are
I
you
think
with
it,
all that
it can
stuff?
get a little bit monotonous. I compared at Sydney Opera House a few weeks ago a whole program of comics from everywhere, England, America, Australia, and there was a similarity about their style. Everything was being done at a half shout. There was a huge amount of sexual material, and I thought to myself, it's becoming too standardized. And because I've seen Woody Allen and Bill Cosby and Peter Cook and Victor Borge, people like that, I think it's a shame if people start deciding that this is what stand-up is. You know, stand-up is what one person does when they get up in front of an audience.
And it has an ebb and flow to it. It's
Yes,
not sort of
absolutely, yes. And the
gag a
trouble is, if you just do 20 minutes, you can do that at a half shout. You can't do that for 2 hours. You have to learn the much more subtle business of the rhythms, as in a movie. You can't be funny all the time.
Can we have a little look at Basil?
Oh,
I think we've got a clip we
absolutely.
can have a look at now.
The days when I had
I
energy.
apologise, but I'm afraid I shall have to ask you to...
Come in.
Sorry to bother you. I thought I'd better apologise for my husband's behaviour.
No, please, really, Mrs. Sporting.
He's going through rather a disturbed time at the moment.
No, please, look, I don't quite understand. He does seem a bit worked up about something, but I'm sure there's some quite innocent explanation.
Basil?
Hi there, just checking the doors.
It still makes you laugh, and you wrote it.
So then I had lunch with Prue yesterday.
Did you?
Yeah.
I bet you look back at that very fondly. You're very generous as well about the other comics
I
that
am.
you've worked with.
I'm a very
Terribly
wonderful
generous.
human
No,
being.
but you talked about the two Ronnies, but Marty Feldman you talk about as well, and of course Graham
Well,
Catlin.
Marty was a writer. And I and Tim Brooke-Taylor turned him into a performer, but he was only a writer when I met him. He used to be the head writer on the Frost Report.
Who was the funniest person you met? Who's the finest comedian?
St. Peter Cook.
Oh, really? Simple as that.
Just as that. He was the only genius that I ever worked with.
Well, and talk about rude materials.
Yes, they got very naughty later on, but for something like 15 years, I remember Frank Muir said he could saw it off by the yard. And if you wanted a 3-minute sketch, it would take Peter 3 minutes to dictate it. He was an absolute genius. And then, funnily enough, he sort of lost it. And then when he lost it, he wasn't able to grind it out the way that the rest of us had to.
John Cleese,
we could talk to you for half an hour. Thank you.
A delight as well. Thank you so much.
Nice
for
to
coming
meet you, Charlie. Nice to meet you, sir.
Reminder, John Cleese Live, the Alimony Tour, is out now.